Right now, it's our time in the studio with Carolina Coral. I welcome Freedom viewers, and let's get straight to the news. Russian occupiers have once again attacked Kherson, and one person was killed in the shelling. This was reported by the head of the Regional Military Administration, Alexander Prokudin. According to him, the Russians struck the center of Kherson early this morning. The person who died sustained injuries incompatible with life. 7 people, including 2 children, were injured in Dnipro after a massive Russian drone attack. About 15 apartment buildings were damaged, their windows shattered, and in one neighborhood, around 10 cars burned. How Dnipro made it through the night? Our correspondents have the story.
It's a lovely little piece, very fresh.
This is the number of the shekel here, 1312 from 25.
After a difficult night, residents of a quiet residential neighborhood in Dnipro are dealing with the aftermath of the Russian drone strike. Warnings about incoming Shaheds started coming in yesterday at around 10:30 p.m. Tatiana says she had already gone to bed at that time.
We woke up, it said there were 10 to 13 Shaheds. We sat, waited, hid. And then there was a strong explosion. That's it. The windows were blown out, the glass shattered.
Tatiana's apartment is on the 8th floor. She says she doesn't have a single intact window left. In the morning, neighbors share with each other what they went through on the night of January 7th.
Both the balcony and the apartment have windows like this. All the glass is gone. The window frame, if I hadn't moved a minute earlier, the frame would have fallen on me. That's how it was on the floor. All the flowers, the soil, everything scattered, destroyed.
The attack drone fell in the courtyard between the 9-story buildings. Several cars immediately caught fire. A fire also broke out in an apartment on the 1st floor.
We went out to the street. It was still shaking so much. I only heard the explosion. Once, and then a second time.
Galina came to the side of the Russian strike in the morning to help her elderly relative. She is 80 years old, and her husband is even older. The elderly couple's apartment, like their neighbors, was left without heating and electricity in the winter, and with the windows blown out.
3 windows are blown out. Kitchen, the living room and the bedroom. And she has an aunt who is 80 years old, and her husband is 82, who is bedridden and disabled. And thank God, in that bedroom where he was lying, the window was covered with a warm blanket. And that's why the glass didn't fall at him.
The Russian drone attack on Dnipro lasted an hour and a half. Fires broke out in 4 locations. 7 people were injured, including 2 children. The 8-year-old girl suffered stress and minor injuries. The 16-year-old girl needed medical assistance. 15 apartment buildings in the city were damaged. About 2,000 windows were shattered in them.
Educational institutions in the city were also affected. This includes a vocational school, kindergartens, and also a lyceum.
Since morning, more than 20 tons of glass debris have already been removed from the sites that were hit by the Russian attack. Utility workers and special equipment remain on site to continue working. Natalia Huss, Stengel Academy, Dnipro, for Freedom TV channel. On the night of January 7th, Russia attacked Ukraine with a ballistic missile and launched 95 strike drones from various directions. Air Defense Forces managed to shoot down most of the enemy targets, according to the Air Force Command of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. 1 Iskander-M missile and 81 Russian UAVs of the Shahed and Gerbera types were shot down or suppressed in the north, center, and also in the east of the country. The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine recorded 221 combat engagements on the front line over the past day. In the southern Slobozhansky direction, Ukrainian forces stopped 15 attacks by the Russian army. In the Lyman and Konstantinovka directions, the enemy tried to advance 18 times in each sector. The Pokrovsk section of the front remains the most tense. There, the invaders attempted 44 assaults. There is also the Huliaipole direction. There, the defense forces repelled 48 Russian attacks. Since the beginning of the year, Russian occupiers have significantly stepped up their efforts and are trying to amass resources in the Serebryansky forest in Luhansk region. This was reported by the press service of the 81st Air Mobile Brigade of the Ukrainian Air Assault Forces. Ukrainian soldiers are doing everything they can to disrupt the enemy's plans. In particular, drone operators from the Apache Unmanned Systems Battalion are deliberately targeting and destroying Russian logistics. But first and foremost, they are eliminating concentrations of vehicles and personnel of the Russian army. Just in the past day, Ukrainian defense forces have eliminated 2 occupiers, destroyed 2 buggies, 4 ATVs, a motorcycle, and 5 enemy shelters. In December, the unmanned systems units of Ukraine's defense forces neutralized more than 33,000 Russian soldiers. That's about as many as Russia drafts in a month. And that's only according to confirmed video evidence. Over the course of a month, Ukrainian aerial drone complexes carried out about 339,000 missions, while ground robotic systems completed nearly 2,100. At the same time, the number of targets hit increased by 31%.
We are fully aware of what we will have to face in the near future, and exactly what needs to be done to neutralize the enemy on the battlefield of unmanned systems. In modern warfare, this is the top priority. To this end, among other things, I have tasked the formation of special units designed to effectively detect and destroy the enemy's high-tech drone units, control centers and crews of unmanned aerial vehicles of the occupiers. Those who have an advantage in the quantity and quality of unmanned systems save more of their warriors and destroy the enemy more effectively. And we continue to hold the advantage in the number of applications. FPV drones. Oleksandr Syrskyi, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, on Telegram.
Another 1,040 Russian occupiers were eliminated by Ukraine's defense forces over the past day. This was reported by the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. Thus, the total losses of the Russian army since the start of the full-scale invasion have exceeded 1,214,000 personnel. In addition, Ukrainian defenders destroyed 3 tanks, 2 armored fighting vehicles, 26 artillery pieces, and 2 multiple rocket launchers yesterday. They also disabled 123 units of Russian vehicles and special equipment. More than 1,500 counter-drone drones per day. In December and January, Ukraine's Ministry of Defense reached a record high in supplying interceptors to Ukrainian forces. This made it possible to significantly increase the capabilities of units in countering aerial threats at various levels, from the front lines to the protection of rear regions. This was noted by the Ukrainian Defense Ministry. Interceptor drones are now a critically important element of multi-layered air defense. They help preserve expensive air defense missile resources by using cheaper means of destruction and prevent air defense systems from being overloaded. Agents of Atesh carried out a successful sabotage operation, destroying a communications tower in Kursk. According to the partisan movement, the target was a key communications hub that was actively used by Russian security forces and numerous military personnel stationed in the city. The destruction of the tower disrupted communications for the FSB and the Federal Penitentiary Service in the Kursk region, as well as their connection to many other military facilities. Problems and coordination between key military units and command centers in the border region are making it harder for the occupying Russian forces to coordinate their actions. This was noted by Atesh. Tightening sanctions against Russia, strengthening Ukrainian air defense, as well as the production and supply of drones. In particular, President Volodymyr Zelenskyy discussed this with his Cypriot counterpart, Nikos. Christodoulides, the head of the Ukrainian state, is currently on a visit to the Republic of Cyprus. The leaders discussed support for Ukraine's European integration during Cyprus's presidency of the EU Council and the prompt opening of negotiation clusters. Volodymyr Zelenskyy emphasized that Ukraine is counting on strong decisions and real progress during these 6 months. In addition, they discussed defense support for Ukraine and Cyprus's participation in the Peel and SAFE programs. Also on the Ukrainian president's agenda are meetings with the President of the European Council, Antonio Costa, and the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen. Ukraine's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Andriy Sybiga, also held a meeting with his Cypriot counterpart. The parties discussed support for Ukraine's accession to the European Union. The head of the Ukrainian Foreign Ministry emphasized the importance of opening negotiation clusters this year. He also noted that Cyprus's role in this is extremely important. The ministers discussed bilateral cooperation between the countries, particularly in the field of security, as well as the use of EU instruments for defense, sanctions, and the reconstruction of Ukraine. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian delegation continues peace talks in Paris. And as the head of the Office of the President of Ukraine, Kirilo Budanov, noted, not all information can be made public, but there are already concrete results. Today, a third negotiation session in 2 days is scheduled with representatives of the President of the United States. Among other things, the most difficult issues will be discussed, namely the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant and the territories. In addition, Volodymyr Zelenskyy has instructed the team to consider possible formats for meetings at the leadership level between Ukraine, other European countries, and the United States. Ukraine does not shy away from the most difficult issues and will never become an obstacle to peace. Peace must be dignified, and that depends on our partners, whether they can ensure that Russia is truly ready to end the war. At the end of the day, I expect a detailed report from our negotiating team. Volodymyr Zelenskyy, President of Ukraine, on Telegram. Earlier, let me remind you, a meeting of the coalition of willing countries took place in the capital of France. As a result, Ukraine, France, and the United Kingdom signed an agreement on the deployment of multinational forces in the country after the end of the war. Other security commitments from partners were also discussed at the meeting. In particular, Poland will play a key role in logistics. President Volodymyr Zelenskyy noted that the documents on security guarantees for Ukraine are ready. They will be signed in the near future. At the same time, Ukraine and the United States signed a separate declaration on security guarantees. The document reaffirms both parties' commitment to achieving a stable peace based on the UN Charter. The document provides for U.S. participation and monitoring the ceasefire, long-term military assistance to Ukraine, the creation of multinational deterrence forces, and a commitment to support Kiev in the event of renewed aggression from Russia. It was also decided to strengthen defense cooperation and to establish a coordination group in Paris for ongoing cooperation. The coalition made it clear that Ukraine's ability to defend itself is crucial for ensuring Ukraine's future collective security and Euro-Atlantic security. We reaffirmed that guaranteeing Ukraine's sovereignty and lasting peace must be an integral part of any peace agreement, and that any settlement must be backed by reliable security guarantees for Ukraine from the Declaration on Security Guarantees for Ukraine. President Emmanuel Macron stated that several thousand French soldiers could be deployed to maintain peace in Ukraine after a ceasefire. These forces will not participate in combat operations, the French president emphasized. He also added that his country will take part in rebuilding the Ukrainian army. The number of personnel in the armed forces of Ukraine after the war will reach up to 800,000 service members, who will be supplied with equipment and resources by partner countries. Other countries are also ready to join the formation of the future deterrent system. In particular, Belgium has announced its readiness to provide aviation and naval forces to help maintain peace in Ukraine after the war. Brussels has simply decided to focus on those areas where it has the greatest capabilities. Our contribution will be concentrated, in particular, on providing air and naval forces and resources, as well as on training efforts where Belgium can make a tangible and meaningful impact. Importantly, these efforts will be backed by strong support from the United States, as well as U.S.-led monitoring, which will ensure effective deterrence and make it possible to achieve long-term stability. A united West can achieve results that will shape the course of history and secure peace. Bart de Wever, Prime Minister of Belgium, on social network X. Sweden, for its part, has announced its readiness to provide Ukraine with Gripen fighter jets and resources for demining the Black Sea after a peace agreement is signed. This is contingent on clear rules for the operation of multinational forces and approval by Parliament. When a peace agreement is reached in Ukraine, Sweden is ready to contribute to security guarantees for Ukraine and the rest of Europe. We are ready to help maintain peace in Ukraine, in particular by providing Gripen fighter jets for aerial surveillance of the country's territory, maritime resources for demining the Black Sea, and continuing the training of Ukrainian military officers. Ulf Kristersson, Prime Minister of Sweden, on social network X. Canada is also considering options for deploying its troops as part of multinational forces, as well as continuing and expanding training programs for Ukrainian military personnel. Prime Minister Mark Carney emphasized that collective actions by allies will be significantly more effective than individual initiatives.